Trade has always been an essential part of human civilization, and we have exchanged goods and cultures with each other since the beginning of written history. Ancient Rome was no different. In fact, trade was the cornerstone of the Roman Empire. But how did the people of this early empire approach trade? Join us as we explore trade in ancient Rome. During the rise of Rome, there was no official coinage, and citizens used bartering for trade. The early Roman Empire was primarily based on agriculture, with livestock being the most commonly dealt commodity. Long before the mass urbanization of Rome, the area was largely farmland, and the inhabitants could sustain themselves with their crops and livestock. However, Rome was poised to become a sprawling metropolis, and its position on the river Tiber gave it access to the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Mediterranean, which would become intrinsic to Rome's trade position. At first, the Romans traded on a local level, much like other European villages. However, military expansion would help them gain a monopoly on trade throughout the known world. As commerce expanded beyond local areas, rudimentary coinage systems developed. The first system, aes rudae, was small chunks of cast bronze that held value due to their scarcity. They were small enough to be carried and exchanged for goods. As Rome expanded, trade became more lucrative and more critical. Soon, three separate monetary systems started to develop independently. Aes grave, cast bronze discs, aes signatum, bronze ingots that weighed around 1,500 grams, and Romano campanian, which were struck coins made of silver and bronze. Despite the riches plundered through warfare, coins were not widely used at this stage, and bartering was still more commonplace, especially for ordinary Roman citizens. Another factor that boosted the Roman economy was the trade of enslaved people. Rome's aggressive military expansion brought in many enslaved people that were then used to complete menial tasks in the larger Roman households, as well as the physically demanding work in farming and mining. Some traders specialized in the buying and selling of people across the Mediterranean, and the practice of slavery was seen as absolutely necessary to the Roman way of life. While Rome aggressively extended its influence through military force, it could be argued that trade motivated Rome's expansion, as power and resources go hand in hand. Whoever controlled the goods had the power, and it was this that drove the development of Rome. Commerce pushed Rome to keep expanding its territories, and Rome desired to acquire high-quality products from across the known world. Usually, before conquering their neighbors, the Romans traded with them and were well aware of their valuable assets. In a couple of instances, the quest to find the origin of goods drove the Romans to explore new countries. For most of the Roman Republic, Britain was a distant and legendary place. The Romans already traded with the Celts, importing salt, slaves, metals, furs, and woolen cloth. The Celts had an extensive trade network throughout Europe that extended to Britain, and some of the items traded would have originated from there. Rome had heard of this distant land, but many doubted its existence. In an attempt to find the origins of traded metals, most famously tin, and the superior woolen cloth, the Romans made expeditions to the Tin Islands, whose location is unknown, which they also believed to be aiding Gaul in their resistance to Rome. They invaded in 55 BCE, hoping to crush Celtic resistance and add Britain to their growing trade network. The Romans also utilized the western end of the Silk Road, receiving silk in exchange for gold, silver, and gems. However, very few merchants made the 4,000-mile journey, and it was usual for goods to pass along a network of traders rather than one or a few traders traveling the whole length of the route. When the Romans first discovered silk through their dealings with conquered people, they did not know where it was made or who was making it. But neither did the people who already used silk. All they knew was that it was a tradable and sought-after commodity. Despite years of searching, the Romans failed to find the land of Syrica, the kingdom of silk, until the first recording of Roman ambassadors in China in 166 CE. At the peak of Roman domination, trade kept society running. The increasingly urbanized areas and the substantial Roman army needed many goods to keep them going, not to mention money to finance them. Trade routes ran throughout Roman territory thanks to the new roads and the numerous trade ports built across Europe and North Africa. One of the most critical ports was Ostia, at the mouth of the river Tiber, as goods could be shipped from all over the Roman territories and imported directly to Rome. The city of Rome had expanded exponentially and now relied on imports to feed its many citizens. Items from Spain, North Africa, and France arrived in Rome via Ostia and were brought up the river Tiber on barges. So, if you needed some serious retail therapy, Rome was the only place to be. In fact, this level of urbanization and commerce would not be seen in the West again until the 1800s. Because Rome was so built up, its citizens relied on retailers rather than living off the land and making essentials themselves. Food, clothing, and more were available in the bustling retail area of the city, and street traders set up around the amphitheaters, bathhouses, temples, and forums, taking advantage of the large foot traffic from citizens and tourists. Outside temples, vendors hawked offerings, such as flower garlands, and next to the amphitheater, gladiatorial programs were sold to spectators coming to support their favorite fighter. But the most prominent trade was in food. Food vendors would pop up anywhere a busy Roman may want to grab a snack. Most commonly, cooked foods like sausages, pastries, and bread could be bought by the poorer Romans who lived in large apartment buildings called insulae. These apartments typically did not contain personal ovens and were notoriously dangerous. The buildings were dark and smelly, and those who did cook at home did so over hot coals, which made fires a regular occurrence. Insulae were often burned to the ground as a result. Grabbing some fast food when you were out and about on the streets of Rome was much safer than cooking in your cramped apartment. In the city, retail outlets came in all forms, from mobile vendors to static stores. Some sellers spread their wares on the ground, while others had formal stalls made of wooden benches, tables, and curtains to mark their place of sale. The ancient Romans were also experts in marketing, and in one depiction of stall holders in Ostia, 2 monkeys can be seen on a stall to entice customers and entertain those in line. Vendors also used their voices to advertise their wares, and many had distinctive cries so you could hear your favorite food seller touting their goods. In these conditions, bartering with livestock was out of the question for most people who lived in Rome. While bartering was still predominant in Roman life, coins became the most convenient paying method. Due to the lack of space to grow food and the number of people living in Rome, the Roman government introduced a grain dole to stop the poorest in the city from starving. Some who received the dole could afford to pay a baker to turn their grain into bread, and others simply mixed the grain with water to create a kind of porridge. Most of the street retailers were almost exclusively used by the lower classes in Rome, and the upper classes generally looked down on the street sellers, preferring to get their produce from the Macellum, which was a luxury food market that auctioned fresh fish, meat, and other high-quality produce to the highest bidder. Retailers of luxury items would also visit the homes of the wealthiest Romans, usually hoping to tempt the lady of the house into a bit of shopping therapy. With demand for exotic goods booming, the Romans made international trade as safe as possible. Most of Rome's trade items were transported by sea, so the Romans built lighthouses at ports and patrolled the waters to deter pirates. Trade routes crossed the Mediterranean and the Black Seas, and to simplify trade as much as possible, they used one currency. The Romans' main exports were food and crop-related products, such as grapes, oil, grain, and cereals. But they also exported non-perishable items, such as pottery and paper. Their biggest exports were olive oil and wine, which could be transported long distances without spoiling. The Romans imported goods from across the globe, but their main trade partners were Africa, Spain, and France. From Africa, they bought ivory, myrrh, incense, tortoise shells, wheat, linen, cotton, and marble. Spain provided olive oil and metals, while wine came from France. Spices, clothing dyes, and cotton were brought in from the southeast, and silk and other expensive fabrics came from China and Persia. Although sea travel was an essential part of the Roman trade network, stormy seas in the winter restricted transport by ships during the winter. However, the Romans also used the extensive road networks they constructed to move the Roman army across the land. At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia and went as far south as North Africa. Goods from all across the empire could be safely and prolifically traded, and this trade network was the backbone of the Roman Empire. The Roman state stamped and sealed merchandise that had been weighed and measured to ensure the quality and consistency of goods and guarantee that the buyer would receive only genuine products. At the peak of the Roman Empire, state intervention was at its highest, regulating traders and taxing imports and exports. However, they also maintained a lucrative free market on a local level that could trade independently without state interference. The Romans had maritime insurance to cover merchants who imported goods from overseas to make international trade even safer for investors. These insurances were loans with high interest rates, which the merchants could use to ship goods. If the loan wasn't repaid, the creditor could take possession of the ship, but if the boat sank, the debt was forgiven. As the trade network across the Roman Empire was so well maintained and regulated, the most immediate effect of Rome's fall was the breakdown of international commerce and trade. The movement of goods became more challenging and dangerous, as the Roman roads fell into disrepair and Roman soldiers no longer patrolled trade routes. Without the coordinated effort of the Romans and their trade partners, the quality of items, such as pottery, deteriorated, and high-quality African pottery was replaced with porous and crumbly vessels made from ill-selected clay. Without the order and protection of Rome, international trade took a serious hit since traders no longer had a guarantee that their goods would make it to their destination. So, what did the Romans ever do for us? Well, safe and efficient international trade for a start. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about ancient Rome, check out our book, Imperial Rome, a captivating guide to events and facts you should know about the Roman Empire. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.